Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. On June the 22nd, the US Air Force and Navy attacked 3 nuclear facilities in Iran: the Fordo fuel enrichment plant, the Natanz nuclear facility, and the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. In a press statement, Trump reported that Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities have been totally and utterly obliterated. Over the days that followed, there was a mad scramble to clarify the extent of the damage, and the Trump administration found themselves splitting hairs over what obliterated actually meant. It has since come to light that the giant bunker-busting bombs may not have done the damage that was first claimed, that the resounding victory in eradicating Iran's nuclear capacity was exaggerated and may not have achieved Trump's objective of being a peacemaker in bringing about peace in the Middle East. MAGA supporters have praised the president for his decisive action, while critics argue that the bombing has only served to escalate the conflict that already wages between Israel and Iran, destabilising the region and creating a global economic crisis for energy. Formerly known as Persia, Iran has been influenced by waves of indigenous and foreign conquerors, as well as immigrants that were Hellenistic, Seleucids and native Parthians and Sassanid. It too experienced an age of empire, where its borders stretched as far as the Caucasus into northern Africa and through what is now Iraq and into Central Asia. While it was never formally colonised by Britain, Iran has experienced colonial influence and became part of Britain's informal empire throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. In my podcast episodes, Colonialism, Just a Thing of the Past, Parts 1 and 2, I break down how Iran came under Britain's sphere of influence. First, the discovery of oil in Iran led to the creation of the Anglo-Persian, later renamed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which, together with a formidable British military presence in the Persian Gulf region, solidified Britain's interest and control over the south of the country, and by 1914 became the company's key shareholders. Secondly, in 1907, Anglo-Russian agreements brought division which came at the expense of Iran's sovereignty and compromised its democratic processes. Agreements also brought with it strategic rivalry between Britain and Russia in the desire for expanding their influence across the Middle East and beyond into Asia. This also worked to erode Iran's sovereignty as it ceded various interventions and agreements. These interventions also led the way for internal support for pro-British factions to further British interests through media, society and government, which influenced political decision-making. It could be said that the British and US coup in 1953, which ousted democratically elected President Mohammad Mossadegh, created a perfect storm for regime change to take place, as Britain feared President Mossadegh's intention to nationalise Iran's oil industry. And since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the Iranian royal family continue to live in exile and is headed by the current king, Reza Pahlavi, son of the last Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. To this day, the family continue to maintain a strong presence in exile by advocating for democratic change in Iran. US Secretary for Defense Hegseth's claim that the strikes were a historic victory for the US begins a war of words. But the reality of war is always the impact it has on the everyday experiences of normal life and the loss of lives on a country and its people. Trump has made no secret of his desire to be awarded a Nobel Prize for Peace, but can he guarantee that his actions on Iran can achieve peace? And what type of peace? And for whom? When an increase in polarisation and rising nationalism provides a vacuum for so-called strong men to establish a sphere of influence, is the US president's desire for a Nobel Prize for Peace motivated by a commitment to achieving a peace that is truly noble? Established in 1895 through the will of Swedish industrialist, inventor and armaments manufacturer Alfred Nobel, the Nobel Prize for Peace is one of 5 prizes awarded annually to recipients across the globe in recognition of their extraordinary contribution in that field. The other fields being chemistry, physics, physiology or medicine, and literature. The Nobel Prize for Peace is awarded to individuals, an organisation or entity that Nobel stated had done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding or promotion of peace congresses. Alfred Nobel. The first prize for peace was awarded on the 10th of December 1910 to the International Peace Bureau, while the most famous recipient of the other categories will most arguably be Albert Einstein, who in 1921 was awarded the prize for his contribution to physics. Recipients of the Prize for Peace have encompassed a stellar range of individuals, from Sir Randall Kramer, the first UK recipient in 1903, to Martin Luther King Jr. in 1964 and Mother Teresa in 1979. Recipients came from those who made a stand for peace across the international divide, such as Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, and Yasser Arafat for a peace negotiation between Israel and Palestine in 1994. In contrast, others were awarded for making their stand for peace through initiating change from within, which I think is harder to achieve, such as Mikhail Gorbachev, who's worked to democratize his country and decentralize the Russian economy. While some were willing to share the prize, such as F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela in 1993, others were not, such as Vietnam's foreign minister, Lee Tuk Tho, who criticised his US counterpart and recipient Henry Kissinger for breaching the ceasefire agreement in 1973. But the beauty of the Nobel Prize for Peace is that it doesn't just recognise the monumental, but also the incidental, such as the impact of a beautiful young 15-year-old Pakistani girl called Malala, who was just minding her own business, walking to school. The motives for President Trump's preoccupation with being awarded a Nobel Prize for Peace is possibly a combination of a competitive desire to emulate and follow in the footsteps of predecessors such as Theodore Roosevelt in 1906, Jimmy Carter in 2002, and Barack Obama 2009, and pressure to achieve twice as many accomplishments in order to step out from their shadows and avoid being trapped in the past of his previous term in office, which he felt was not of his own making, and now in his second term feels that the only way to make his mark in power is to take action where he can stand out from his predecessors and shine in his own way. But at what cost? The US strikes on Iran were not a result of consultation with US Congress, the UN Security Council, or with its NATO allies, and is not only a violation of international law, but questions the role of the UN, NATO, and the possible emergence of a new international order. In light of this, is it ironic that the US President would view his unilateral decision as that of a peacemaker? Like Africa, the Middle East's present-day borders were the result of an agreement. For Africa, it was the Berlin Conference in 1884. For the Middle East, it's the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916, which led to the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire. Both agreements not only acted to serve the interests of major European powers such as Britain and France, but purposefully drew boundary lines in such a way that would cause territorial and tribal disputes, creating permanent conflict. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's threat on Taiwan, and Iran's capacity for nuclear weapons are all viewed as a threat to maintaining global peace for the future. However, when you look at the roll call of events in other parts of the world, Kenya, Ethiopia and Eritrea, Sudan, and the Congo and Rwanda, to name just a few, you realise that you're still fighting elements of war from the past. Peace cannot be peace if it simply serves as a defence of your own interests through the conflicts that you have created. If this is the case, then the work of a US president or any world leader's desire for a gold medal is futile. The vital element that is missing here are the lessons to be learnt from history and an understanding that in the search for peace, one must come to terms with the origins of war and one's role within it. Until then, the world will continue to struggle in the search for a peace that is noble. If you liked this podcast, then stay on this listening platform and check out my other episodes related to this one. Colonialism, Just a Thing of the Past, Parts 1 and 2, and Where is Afghanistan? 20 years ago, 2 weeks later, Parts 1 and 2. And don't forget what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories, or poetic narratives as I like to call them. Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Knights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change. These are all available on the website in paperback, on Amazon in Kindle format, and in ebook format at Apple Books and all other digital platforms. Also, the publication of the latest 4 titles. Now, if you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and A Story for South Africa. If you'd like to sign up to my email list, just visit the website where you can opt in and receive your free samples of my first 4 titles. And finally, remember that you can also send me an audio message on the SpeakPipe link, which is also in the show notes. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to like, follow and share us on social media when you visit the website. Just click on to whichever social media platform you would like to follow us on. And, as always, it's a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own, because history is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW, and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next